Some people can enter a room and immediately sense that something is wrong. Nobody has raised their voice, nobody has said anything offensive, everyone is smiling. And yet, this person notices the silence between two friends, the tension hiding inside a joke, the way someone's eyes change when a certain name is mentioned. They see the conversation everyone is having, and the completely different conversation happening underneath it. You may call this intuition, you may call it emotional intelligence, you may even think it is a psychological superpower. But people who constantly notice what others miss often experience it very differently. Because when your mind is trained to detect contradictions, hidden motives, and emotional shifts, ordinary life stops feeling ordinary. A friendly compliment can sound rehearsed. A sudden change in tone can feel like a warning. A smile can reveal more than the words surrounding it. And after a while, you no longer know whether your perception is protecting you or slowly separating you from everyone around you. Because seeing more does not always make life clearer. Sometimes, it only gives you more things to question. Today, we are exploring the psychology of people who see what others don't, why their minds work this way, the hidden cost of extreme perception, and how they can use this ability without becoming trapped inside it. Let's begin. The human brain is constantly making predictions. It does not simply wait for reality to happen. It compares everything happening now with patterns it has collected in the past. Most of this process happens outside conscious awareness. When someone speaks, your brain is not only processing their words, it is also registering their tone, posture, facial tension, rhythm, distance, and timing. For most people, much of this information remains in the background. But highly perceptive individuals seem to give that background information a much louder voice. Imagine two people watching the same movie. The first person follows the main character in the dialogue. The second person notices the unfinished drink on the table, the clock in the background, the hesitation before a response, and the shadow moving behind the door. They are watching the same scene, but they are processing two completely different amounts of information. Psychologists sometimes describe rapid judgments based on limited information as thin slicing. The mind takes tiny fragments of behavior and uses them to form an impression. A person may not consciously understand why they distrust someone. They may simply say, "I don't know, something feels off." But underneath that feeling, the brain may have detected several small inconsistencies. The person's voice sounded warm, but their body moved away. They said they were relaxed, but their jaw remained tense. They laughed, but only after checking whether everyone else was laughing. No single signal proves anything, but together the signals create a pattern. This is where perception becomes powerful and dangerous, because the brain is excellent at recognizing patterns. But it is not always excellent at determining whether those patterns are true. Sometimes perceptive people accurately sense what others overlook. Other times they connect details that were never connected at all. The difficulty is knowing the difference. Highly perceptive people often reach emotional conclusions before they have concrete proof. They sense that a friendship is changing before anyone admits it. They notice that a coworker is becoming hostile before the conflict becomes visible. They feel that someone is preparing to leave long before the final conversation happens. This can make them seem almost prophetic. But imagine how frustrating it is to recognize a storm while everyone else still sees blue sky. You cannot point to the rain. You cannot show them the lightning. All you have are subtle changes in the wind. So when you speak, people may tell you that you are imagining things. You're reading too much into it. You always expect the worst. Why can't you just relax? And sometimes they are right. But sometimes, weeks later, exactly what you feared begins to happen. The friend slowly disappears. The relationship ends. The workplace conflict explodes. And instead of feeling satisfied, you feel even more isolated. Because now your brain learns a dangerous lesson. My suspicions keep protecting me. I should trust them even more. This can create a self-reinforcing loop. The person begins treating every uncomfortable feeling like an early warning system. They stop waiting for evidence because waiting feels unsafe. Consider a simple example. Someone sends their partner a message. Usually, the partner responds quickly. Today, several hours pass. Most people may assume the partner is busy, but a highly alert mind begins searching for meaning. Why are they taking longer? Did something change yesterday? Was their voice colder this morning? Did I say something wrong? Is there someone else? Within minutes, one delayed response becomes the first chapter of an imagined betrayal. The person is not trying to create drama, their mind is trying to eliminate uncertainty. Because uncertainty feels like standing in a dark room where something may be hiding. Analysis becomes a flashlight, but the more desperately they search, the more shadows they create. There is another problem with seeing beneath behavior. You may begin understanding the wound behind someone's personality. The controlling manager is terrified of appearing weak. The person who constantly talks about success may secretly feel insignificant. The friend who mocks everyone may be protecting themselves from rejection. The emotionally distant partner may have learned that vulnerability leads to pain. Understanding these patterns can produce compassion, but it can also trap people in unhealthy relationships. Because when you understand why someone hurts you, it becomes easier to excuse the fact that they continue hurting you. You say, "They are not cruel, they're just afraid. They do not mean to manipulate me, they have abandonment issues. They are only acting this way because of what happened in their childhood." All of that may be psychologically accurate, but understanding the origin of a behavior does not erase its consequences. A fire may have an understandable cause. It can still burn down your house. Highly perceptive people often become emotional translators for everyone around them. They explain the angry person to the frightened person. They calm the anxious person. They predict conflicts and adjust themselves before those conflicts happen. They become experts at managing the emotional temperature of a room. But nobody asks what temperature they need. This creates a painful imbalance. They can identify everyone else's hidden needs, yet struggle to express their own. They know when someone needs reassurance. They know when someone wants space. They know when a joke is actually a request for attention. But when they themselves feel exhausted, lonely, or overwhelmed, they may say nothing. Partly because they are accustomed to being the observer, and observers often forget that they are also participants. Eventually, people begin treating them like an emotional emergency service. Everyone calls when something is wrong. Everyone shares secrets with them. Everyone expects them to understand. But when they need support, others assume they will solve it themselves. This is the loneliness of being deeply useful, but rarely deeply seen. When you constantly study behavior, you may begin predicting people before they act. At first, this feels like protection. You recognize manipulation early. You avoid people who seem dishonest. You prepare for disappointment before it arrives. But slowly, protection becomes emotional distance. You stop experiencing conversations and start monitoring them. You do not simply listen to what someone says. You analyze why they said it, why they used that word, why they paused, and what they might be trying to achieve. Even kindness becomes suspicious. A compliment may feel strategic. An apology may feel calculated. A gift may feel like compensation for something you have not discovered yet. The mind becomes a private investigation that never officially closes. And when everything has a hidden motive, genuine connection becomes almost impossible. Trust requires a small amount of blindness. Not stupidity, not denial, blindness. It requires accepting that you will never have complete information about another human being. You cannot fully know what they think when they look at you. You cannot guarantee they will never disappoint you. You cannot investigate your way into emotional safety. But highly perceptive people often try. They believe that if they notice enough, understand enough, and predict enough, they can avoid pain. This is hypervigilance disguised as wisdom. Hypervigilance often develops when a person has lived in an environment where subtle changes mattered. Perhaps they grew up around an unpredictable parent. They learned to study footsteps in the hallway, the sound of a door closing, the difference between an ordinary silence and a dangerous silence. Maybe affection was inconsistent. Maybe conflict appeared without warning. Maybe they had to recognize other people's moods quickly to remain emotionally safe. What began as adaptation later became personality. The child who learned to scan the room became the adult who cannot stop scanning people. Their perception may truly be exceptional. But its original purpose was not curiosity, it was survival. And a survival system does not care whether you are happy, it only cares whether you are prepared. There is an important truth that highly perceptive people sometimes resist. Not every feeling is intuition. Sometimes it is fear wearing intuition's clothes. Intuition is often quiet. It notices something, stores the information, and waits. Fear is urgent. It demands an immediate conclusion. Intuition says, "Pay attention." Fear says, "You already know what this means." Intuition remains open to new evidence. Fear searches only for confirmation. This distinction is essential because a perceptive mind can become vulnerable to confirmation bias. Once it suspects someone is dishonest, every action becomes evidence. If the person talks too much, they are covering something. If they talk too little, they are hiding something. If they act warmly, they are manipulating. If they act coldly, the suspicion was correct. The theory becomes impossible to disprove. At that point, perception is no longer revealing reality. It is controlling reality. The person sees what they expect to see, and because they are intelligent, they can construct extremely convincing explanations for almost any conclusion. Intelligence does not protect us from cognitive bias. Sometimes, it simply makes us better at defending it. So how can someone keep their sensitivity without becoming consumed by it? The answer is not to become less observant. The answer is to become more disciplined about interpretation. Suppose a friend becomes unusually quiet. The observation is, my friend is speaking less than usual. The story might be, they are angry with me, or they are hiding something, or they no longer value this friendship. The observation is real. The story is only one possible explanation. Perceptive people should learn to pause between these two stages. Notice the signal, but do not immediately turn it into a verdict. Ask, what do I actually know? What am I assuming? What other explanations are possible? Perhaps the friend is tired. Perhaps they received difficult news. Perhaps they are distracted by something unrelated to you. Seeing a detail does not automatically mean understanding it. Real psychological maturity is not the ability to create the fastest interpretation. It is the ability to hold several interpretations without panicking. You may notice that two people secretly dislike each other. You may recognize that someone is pretending to be more confident than they feel. You may detect that a friend is making a poor decision. But not everything you recognize requires intervention. Some truths are information. They are not instructions. Before speaking, ask 3 questions. Does this directly affect me? Could my involvement genuinely improve the situation? Has anyone asked for my perspective? If the answer is no, silence may not be weakness. It may be emotional discipline. Perceptive people sometimes feel responsible for preventing every disaster they can predict. But constantly saving others can become a form of control. People are allowed to make choices you would not make. They are allowed to trust someone you distrust. They are allowed to learn slowly. Wisdom is not forcing everyone to see what you see. Wisdom is knowing when your vision is useful and when it is intrusive. A single strange moment is not always meaningful. A repeated pattern is. Instead of reacting to every small signal, watch what happens over time. One delayed message is not abandonment. Repeated emotional withdrawal may be important. One awkward comment is not manipulation. A consistent pattern of guilt, pressure, and control deserves attention. One forced smile does not reveal someone's entire character. Human beings are complicated, tired, and inconsistent. Let behavior accumulate before making a major conclusion. This protects you from 2 dangers at once. It prevents you from ignoring genuine red flags, and it prevents you from turning every imperfection into a red flag. Your perception becomes evidence-based rather than anxiety-driven. You will misread people sometimes. You will trust someone who disappoints you. You will fail to notice something important. You may even suspect someone who is completely innocent. This does not mean your perception is useless. It means you are human. The desire to read everyone perfectly often comes from a deeper desire to never be vulnerable. But connection without vulnerability is impossible. To love someone is to accept that they possess the freedom to surprise you. To trust someone is to understand that certainty is unavailable. To live fully is to know that pain cannot always be predicted or prevented. The goal is not to become impossible to hurt. The goal is to become strong enough to recover when hurt happens. Because a life built entirely around avoiding betrayal eventually becomes a life where nobody is allowed close enough to betray you, or close enough to love you. People who see what others don't often believe their greatest ability is detecting lies. But that is not the highest form of perception. The highest form is seeing complexity without immediately judging it. It is recognizing someone's insecurity without humiliating them. It is noticing tension without feeding it. It is understanding pain without accepting mistreatment. It is seeing a mask and realizing that sometimes the mask is not a weapon. Sometimes it is a bandage. True perception is not about exposing everyone. It is about navigating reality with awareness, boundaries, and compassion. Think of your mind not as a courtroom constantly delivering verdicts, but as an observatory. It watches. It gathers information. It notices patterns. but it does not declare every shadow a threat. When you develop this kind of discipline, your sensitivity stops being a prison. You can enter a room and notice everything without carrying everything. You can sense dishonesty without becoming obsessed with proving it. You can understand someone's pain without making it your responsibility. You can trust carefully without demanding certainty. And perhaps most importantly, you can allow yourself to participate in life rather than constantly standing outside it, analyzing everyone who walks by. Because seeing what others don't is not the same as knowing everything. Sometimes the most perceptive thing you can do is admit that you do not yet have the full picture. So, which part of this experience feels most familiar to you? Living ahead of the evidence? Understanding people so deeply that you excuse them? Or analyzing every interaction until you can no longer enjoy it? Share your answer in the comments. Someone reading it may realize they are not the only person whose mind works this way. And if this video helped you understand yourself or someone close to you, subscribe for more explorations into the hidden patterns that shape human behavior. Thank you for watching. And remember, your ability to notice more should help you live more wisely. It should not force you to live more alone.